When I woke up, there was no sound. At first, I thought the world had gone quiet, that somehow morning itself had forgotten to breathe. The hospital room was drenched in pale light, sterile and still. I could see the nurse's lips moving, her eyes soft with concern, but her words vanished into emptiness. No hum of machines, no footsteps, no heartbeat in my ears, just an endless, suffocating silence. They told me later, in gestures and scribbled notes, that the accident had damaged the tiny bones in my ears. Temporary, they said. 3 weeks of rest, maybe more. 3 weeks. That was how long I would live without sound. I tried to cry that first night, but even my sobs felt hollow, as if grief had no voice any more. Sophie was there, of course. My daughter, my only reason to keep breathing after her father passed 8 years ago. She walked into the hospital room wearing that familiar rose-colored sweater, the one I'd knitted for her last Christmas. Her smile was bright, almost too bright, as if it were trying to hide something. "Hi, Mom," she mouthed slowly, exaggerating each word so I could read her lips. I nodded. I could still see her kindness, her warmth, or maybe I just wanted to see it. She touched my hand. "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." It became her favorite sentence during those weeks. She said it so often I could almost hear it echo in my mind. I'll take care of everything. The rent. The bills, my medication, the house, the world. I had no choice but to believe her. When they discharged me, the silence followed home like an unwelcome guest. The house felt unfamiliar, like a museum of my old life. Every object seemed louder in my memory than it ever had been in sound. The squeak of the kitchen chair, the creak of the floorboards, the rain tapping on the window. I could still see it, but I couldn't hear it. I'd been a music teacher once. My entire life had revolved around melody, the soft hum of strings, the laughter of children learning to play. Now, even my violin sat untouched in the corner, like a relic from a world I could no longer enter. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and imagine the sound of Sophie's laughter when she was little, high, pitched and contagious, filling every room. The silence mocked me with its absence. Sophie took over everything, paying bills, answering calls, even speaking to the doctors on my behalf. At first I was grateful. Watching her handle things so confidently made me proud. She had grown into a strong, capable woman. I thought her father would have been proud too. But slowly I began to notice small things. Phone calls she took in whispers, stepping into another room. Documents she folded quickly and slid into her purse when I walked in. Conversations that stopped abruptly the moment I appeared. Once I caught her speaking to someone on the phone. I couldn't hear the words, of course, but her face told a story, impatient, irritated, angry. Then she turned, saw me watching, and her expression melted into a practiced smile. "Just work stuff," she mouthed. "You don't need to worry." But something inside me twisted. I'd always trusted Sophie, completely, blindly. But silence sharpens the senses in strange ways. I began to see more than I ever did when I could hear. The way her eyes darted to the locked drawer in the study, the slight delay before she smiled, the weight of secrets she carried in her shoulders. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass, I tried to remember the last real conversation we'd had. Not about bills or medicine, but about us, about love, about life. I couldn't. It was as if my deafness had drawn an invisible curtain between us. She was there, her lips moving, her body moving, but her heart felt miles away. In the silence, I began to realize something terrifying. Perhaps the distance between us hadn't begun with my deafness. Perhaps it had been growing for years, hidden under the noise of everyday life. I started keeping a small notebook by my bed. Every night, I'd write one sentence about Sophie, things I noticed, questions I couldn't ask. Why is she always on the phone late at night? Why did she avoid Dr. Harris's call? Why did she ask for my bank papers? It wasn't suspicion at first, just curiosity. The quiet made me think too much, 3 weeks felt like a lifetime. The days melted into each other, and my world became a painting, all color, no sound. I learned to read lips better, to watch expressions, to feel vibrations through the floor when Sophie dropped something. Sometimes I thought I could almost hear a faint hum, a memory of sound, but it would vanish the moment I tried to grasp it. Still, I prayed. Every night before I went to sleep, I pressed my hands together and mouthed the same words, asterisk please, just one more chance to hear her voice again. To hear the world. Asterisk, what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly imagine, was that my prayer would be answered, and that when it was, I would wish I had remained in silence forever. The morning I heard the clock tick again, I thought I was dreaming. It was faint at first, a thin, hesitant asterisk tick, tick asterisk, like the heartbeat of time itself trying to reach me through layers of cotton. I sat up slowly, holding my breath, afraid that if I moved too quickly, the fragile sound would shatter and vanish. But it didn't. It grew stronger, louder, real. My eyes burned as tears spilled down my cheeks. I covered my mouth to stifle a cry, and for the first time in 3 weeks I heard my own sob. Weak, broken, but mine. The world had sound again. When Sophie came into the room carrying my breakfast tray, I almost told her right away. I wanted to hear her voice, to thank her, to tell her that the silence was finally over, but something in her face stopped me. She looked tired, yes, but also distracted, distant, almost cold. Her smile was automatic, the kind that reached the lips but not the eyes. She set down the tray and began talking, slowly, enunciating as she always did. Oatmeal again, she mouthed. You need strength. I nodded, pretending to read her lips, while my heart pounded with a secret she didn't know. I could hear her voice now, soft and careful. But beneath it, I sensed something else, a chill. As she left the room, her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at me, then slipped into the kitchen. I heard her voice through the half-closed door. Yeah, it's fine, she said, her tone sharper now, no trace of sweetness. No, she still can't hear a thing. Yeah, I told you. The doctor said it might be permanent. My stomach clenched. She paused, lowering her voice. Stop worrying, Ryan. Once the papers are signed, it's done. She trusts me completely. The sound of my daughter's laughter, that laughter I had prayed to hear again, sliced through me like glass. I sat frozen, every muscle trembling. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I was hearing. Asterisk Ryan. Asterisk I didn't know a Ryan. She's barely lucid half the time. Sophie continued, pouring herself coffee. Honestly, she doesn't even check what she signs anymore. Once the house is in my name, I'll finally be free. God, I can't wait to get out of here. I covered my mouth to keep from gasping. The room spun around me. My heart seemed to stop, then start again in uneven thuds, free from me. The daughter I'd raised alone, the child I'd fed, clothed, and loved without condition, was talking about freedom as if my existence was a cage. I pressed my hands against my ears, but I could still hear her every word, every cruelty. She's not getting better, Sophie said. The doctor mentioned a care home in Westfield. Once I've got the deed, we can move in together. I'll just say it's what she wanted. She laughed again, lighter now, and the sound twisted in my chest until I thought I might break apart. I couldn't listen anymore. I backed away from the kitchen doorway, my breath coming in sharp bursts. My legs felt weak, my heart weaker. I stumbled into the living room and sat down, staring at the photographs on the mantel. There we were, Sophie at age 6, sitting on my lap with her missing front teeth and a music note painted on her cheek. Her father, gone too soon, smiling beside us. I remembered how she used to cling to me at night when the thunder scared her. How she'd whisper, asterisk, don't leave me, Mommy. Asterisk, now she was the one plotting to leave, to throw me away like a burden. That afternoon I made a decision. I would not tell her I could hear again. Not yet. Something deep inside me, something older and wiser than heartbreak, told me to stay silent, to watch, to listen, so I played my part. When she came back into the room, I smiled faintly and pointed at my ear, shaking my head as if I still couldn't hear. She smiled back, relieved maybe, pitying. "Don't worry, Mom," she mouthed. "I'll take care of everything." That phrase again. Only now I could hear the falseness in her voice, the rehearsed tone. She didn't mean asterisk take care of me. Asterisk she meant asterisk take care of my life. Asterisk over the next few days I listened more than I had ever listened before. Sophie took more phone calls when she thought I was asleep. I learned the name of the lawyer, asterisk Mr. Langford asterisk, and that she had forged my signature on some papers. I learned about the secret bank account she'd opened, transferring my savings in small amounts so it wouldn't be noticed. Each discovery was another wound, another proof that the child I loved had become a stranger, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I began to plan. At night, I'd sit in my room and write down every detail, every time, every name, every cruel word she said when she believed I was deaf. I hid the notebook inside my old violin case, under the strings that once gave me comfort. It felt poetic, somehow, the betrayal of a daughter hidden inside the instrument that once carried my soul. And yet, even as anger took root, a part of me grieved. I still remembered the girl she had been, the way she'd danced barefoot in the kitchen, the way she'd begged me to sing her lullabies. Where had that child gone? Maybe silence hadn't stolen my world. Maybe it had revealed it. 3 weeks ago, I had prayed to hear again. Now, I wished I hadn't. The sound of my daughter's voice, dripping with deceit, was worse than any silence could ever be. But I would wait. I would watch, and when the time came, she would know that the mother she underestimated had not been silenced, only patient. I looked at my reflection in the window that night, the moonlight casting pale shadows across my face. "You took my silence for weakness," I whispered, my voice trembling but steady. "But I hear you now, Sophie. I hear everything. Silence had once been my prison. Now it had become my weapon." For days after I first heard Sophie's betrayal, I lived between two worlds, one of appearances and one of truth. To her, I was still the helpless, deaf mother who nodded and smiled while she spoke. But inside I was wide awake, hearing every rustle of paper, every whisper through the walls, every sigh of frustration when she thought I wasn't looking. I had spent most of my life teaching others to listen to music, to rhythm, to the spaces between notes. Now I was learning to listen again, only this time not to melody but to lies. The first thing I did was learn her schedule. Sophie worked from home most mornings, laptop open, coffee beside her, phone glued to her hand. I would sit at the table pretending to read or knit, while my mind memorized every word. That's how I learned about asterisk Mr. Langford asterisk, the lawyer she'd been using. That's how I discovered the care home brochure, hidden in the drawer beneath the television, Westfield Residential Care, with a smiling nurse on the front cover and the words asterisk, "Your loved ones are in safe hands" asterisk beneath it. Safe hands, the irony almost made me laugh. At night, when Sophie went out to see friends, I searched quietly through her desk drawers. My hands shook, not from fear of being caught, but from the heartbreak of having to look at my daughter's things like she was a stranger. There were bills, bank statements, printouts of emails. One caught my eye, a letter addressed to asterisk Mrs. Eleanor Bennett asterisk, typed in cold, formal language. It was about transferring the property title to a new joint account, one that included Sophie's name. My name at the bottom was forged, not even carefully, sloppy, lazy. I sat down at her desk and closed my eyes. She hadn't even cared enough to get it right. The next morning, I made my first move. When Sophie left for the supermarket, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, Daniel Carter. My husband's old friend. He was a lawyer once, one of the good ones. We hadn't spoken much since my husband's funeral, but I remembered how gently he'd taken Sophie's hand that day, telling her, "If you ever need help, I'm only a call away." The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Hello, Daniel Carter speaking." For a moment I froze. My voice felt foreign after so many days of pretending. "Daniel," I whispered, "it's Eleanor Bennett. I can hear again." There was a pause, then warmth. "Eleanor, good Lord, it's been years. Are you all right?" "No," I said softly, "but I will be." I told him everything. Not all at once. My voice trembled too much for that, but enough. About the accident, the deafness, the deception, the overheard conversation, the forged papers. When I finished, there was silence on his end. Finally he said, "Eleanor, listen to me. Don't confront her yet. Let's do this the right way." His words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The rain was falling again, soft and steady. I could hear it clearly now, every drop, every rhythm, and it filled me with both comfort and sadness. Once, Sophie and I used to sit together during storms, wrapped in blankets, drinking cocoa and listening to the rain. She used to say it sounded like a lullaby. Now it sounded like a countdown. Over the next few days, Daniel helped me quietly gather proof. He came by pretending to check the house wiring, carrying a toolbox that hid a small recorder inside. We recorded Sophie's conversations when she spoke to Ryan about the transfer and the new account. I learned that she'd been siphoning my savings to fund Ryan's failed business. That the reason she wanted the house so badly wasn't sentiment, it was collateral. Each revelation hurt less than the last. My tears had dried into something harder, colder. I began to move differently around the house, slower, quieter, watching her not as a mother watches her daughter, but as a hunter watches prey. Sometimes, though, I caught glimpses of the girl she used to be, and those moments nearly broke me. One evening, she came into my room holding a cup of tea. "Mom," she mouthed, "I'll handle your appointment tomorrow, all right." She placed the cup beside me, her hand brushing mine briefly, soft, familiar. For a second, I saw the child who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. The same hands that had once clung to mine on her first day of school. But then she smiled, and I saw calculation behind it. "The illusion shattered, thank you," I said aloud, softly, pretending not to notice the flicker of surprise on her face. I hadn't spoken much since the accident. She probably thought I just needed to hear my own voice again. If only she knew what those words really meant. Daniel called me the next day. "It's almost ready," he said. "We have the recordings, the documents, even the forged signature comparison. Just one more step. Let her think she's one. Let her think she's one." The phrase echoed in my mind as I watched Sophie that evening, humming while she cooked dinner. She looked happy, free, triumphant. She thought I was hers to control, a broken woman too grateful to question her. But in truth, I was the one watching the clock now, waiting, listening. Later that night, I took out my violin from its case for the first time since the accident. The strings were dusty, the bow dry, but I tuned it carefully, letting the faint notes fill the air. The sound was fragile, but alive, just like me. As I played, I realized something profound. Silence hadn't been a curse. It had been a teacher. It had shown me truth without the distraction of words. It had stripped away illusion until only honesty remained. When I finished, I whispered into the empty room, "You took everything from me, Sophie, my peace, my trust, my pride, but I will take something from you too, not out of hatred, but justice." The violin string trembled beneath my finger, echoing like a promise. The next morning, Sophie announced that Mr. Langford would be coming by the following week for the final paperwork. She smiled sweetly as she told me, as if it were a favor she was doing out of love. I smiled back, nodding slowly, pretending to understand only half her words. Inside, I felt an almost serene calm. The stage was set, the trap was ready, and for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't afraid. Because silence had taught me how to listen, and soon the world, especially my daughter, would learn how to hear me. The day Mr. Langford arrived, the air in the house was electric with quiet tension. Sophie had been bustling around, arranging papers, clearing the table, checking her phone every few minutes, as if the world would end if she wasn't in control. I sat in the living room, knitting, pretending to read a magazine. Every so often, I glanced up and caught her expression, sharp, impatient, triumphant. She thought she had won, but I had a secret. Mr. Langford stepped into the house with a polite smile, briefcase in hand. "Good afternoon, ladies," he said. His eyes flickered briefly to me, lingering in a way that felt almost conspiratorial. Sophie's smile was radiant. "Afternoon, Mr. Langford. Shall we get started?" I watched silently as she laid out the papers, the pen poised in her hand. My heart beat steadily, each thrum a quiet drum of anticipation, and then, as if the world itself had paused, I spoke. "Stop." Sophie froze, the pen hovered in the air, her smile faltered. "Mom," she said, a note of genuine confusion creeping into her voice. "I can hear everything," I said, not a whisper, not a mumble, every word precise, deliberate, every syllable echoing in the room like the strike of a bell. Sophie's face went pale. "Why? You what?" I set my knitting aside and stood, the violin case tucked under my arm. I opened it and lifted the violin, fingers poised on the strings. I let one note hang in the air, long, piercing, almost aching in its beauty. 3 weeks of silence, I said, my voice calm, deliberate. 3 weeks of listening, and now I hear everything. I placed the violin down and gestured toward the papers. "Sophie, why don't you explain these to us?" She stumbled over her words. I don't, Mom, I can explain. Yes, please." I interrupted gently, almost too gently. "Explain how you plan to transfer my house, siphon my savings, and put me into Westfield care, all while smiling in my face." Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the kind of tears I wanted. They were fear, panic, shame. I didn't mean," she began, but the words faltered. I held up the recorder, the papers, the carefully gathered evidence. "I heard your entire conversation with Ryan. I found the letters. I have the bank statements. Every forged signature, every lie, every plan. Mr. Langford's eyes softened with approval, but I didn't need his approval. I had spent weeks in the silence of my own mind, preparing for this moment. Sophie collapsed into the chair, her hands shaking. I thought you were deaf. I thought you would never. You thought wrong." I said softly, sitting across from her. "I was deaf, yes, but silence has a way of teaching you what words cannot. It showed me your truth." Her head dropped into her hands. The room was heavy with emotion, betrayal, guilt, and finally understanding. I picked up the violin again, and this time I played for Sophie. Not for revenge, not for triumph, but for truth. The notes filled the room, sweet and sorrowful, strong and tender, like the life we had once shared before deceit entered. "You wanted freedom," I said between notes. "I will not take away your freedom, Sophie, but you will not take mine either." I handed her the papers. "Cancel these plans, return everything, and start again, honestly or not at all." Sophie nodded, tears streaming freely now, the first real tears of remorse I had seen. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know why I let greed. I put a hand on hers." "You've been lost, Sophie, but it's not too late to find your way back. We can rebuild, but only with truth, only with love." Weeks later, the house felt different. Not silent, no, the silence had left, but it left behind something stronger, honesty. Sophie and I spent evenings talking, really talking and listening. She told me about her struggles, the pressure of adulthood, the mistakes she had made. And I told her about the fear and grief of losing not only my hearing, but my trust in her. We laughed again, sometimes over silly things, sometimes over memories of her childhood. Sometimes we cried together for the years lost, for the betrayal, for the moments stolen by greed and silence. And I realized something powerful. Revenge had never been the goal. Survival had been. Awareness had been. The ability to hear, to understand, to act with clarity, that was my victory. I had regained my hearing, yes. But more than that, I had regained my life. Sophie learned a hard lesson, that betrayal, even by blood, has consequences. And that love, even after betrayal, can be rebuilt, but only on the foundation of truth. And sometimes I think back to those first silent weeks, and I smile. For in the quiet I had found my strength, and when the violin sings, I hear not just music, I hear freedom, honesty, and the sound of a life reclaimed.